Hey everybody, welcome to the latest video talking a little bit about big games coming up in D1A Rugby. Remember, this season, especially once January starts, it goes by pretty quickly and we're wrapping up. We're talking about playoffs in April, the championship in the first weekend in May, so we don't have a lot of time. So it's interesting to see what games coming up in February especially are really ones you want to have a look at. First off, we want to thank our sponsors. Irish Rugby Tours. Hey, you always want to go on tour. Touring the world, sharing rugby with people all over the world. That's what the sport is all about. IrishRugbyTours.com. Go find out how you can get a tour going pretty much anywhere in the world. Next Phase Rugby, which connects college rugby programs with high school rugby players. It's helping players and rugby programs all over the country, seeing more and more young rugby players choosing to play rugby at a serious level because of the app. NextPhaseRugby.com is how you download the app for both sides. And the Panther Rugby Academy, thank you for their support, providing high performance and skills development through the USA Rugby South Panther Rugby Academy. And you can support grassroots rugby by supporting the US Rugby Foundation, usrugbyfoundation.org. And they get new teams started, they get ball grants for teams, other ways to support teams and programs, but also individuals with scholarships and special opportunities. So go check out what they do and help support them. So February comes along and there are a couple of questions here. One is sort of like, who's going to be top dog, who's going to get those big seeds, and then who's also going to make their way and perhaps fill out a playoff bracket or challenge for something like that. So as we look into February, one of the early games to look at would be Cal Poly against UC Santa Cruz. And that's all about the chase for, let's be honest, second place in the California Conference. St. Mary's is probably going to be first. But if you're second in the California Conference, you've got a pretty good shot of getting into a playoff position, and then who knows? So let's have a look at that. Cal Poly, UCSC, that's a big game early on, and actually coming later in February, Santa Cruz takes on Cal State Long Beach, and then Sacramento State plays San Diego State. That's kind of a big weekend to find out exactly what the pecking order is. We already saw Cal Poly defeat San Diego State by a significant margin, but I still think that there's a lot to figure out there. And Santa Cruz against Cal State Long Beach, that could be a huge one later on in February. Cal Poly still probably on the inside track on that to chase for second place. In the second weekend in February, BYU goes to Cal. Great rivalry. Cal, by all accounts, very, very strong this year. BYU, well, they used to be the perennial national champs. They dipped a little bit. They've been working their way back up. I think they have what it takes potentially to make a final, potentially to win it all. We don't know. They've done really well in the fall. This is going to be a big one on the road. At the same time, on the same weekend, Central Washington visits Arizona. We've already seen Central Washington start big with a couple of wins over top Canadian teams, UVic and UBC. Going on the road in Arizona, that's a little bit different situation for them. It's important for them to come out with a good performance because they're an independent team. So every game, just like with Grand Canyon, with Arkansas State, every game is massive because you can't really say, well, it's not a conference game, so we'll take it easy, things like that. They have to perform well. Arizona, huge thing for them to just put in a good performance. They did lose to St. Mary's, but they weren't completely steamrolled by St. Mary's. Still early days for the Wildcats. It's the Wildcat versus the Wildcat. Still early days for Arizona Wildcats. And if they put in a performance there, hey, we're going to be paying attention to that. And finally, on February 10, Lindenwood against Mary Washington. That's kind of a wild card one. Just getting out of the winter, Lindenwood and Mary Washington will be reacquainting themselves with playing rugby this time for the winter-spring season. Lindenwood swept through their fall schedule, no problem. Beat BYU, that was a big one. Mary Washington back in D1A, and this is their first year back in the D1A fold, and they did very well in Rugby East. They defeated Mount St. Mary's. They had overall a strong record, and if they do well against Lindenwood, this is something where in trying to fill out that Eastern bracket, you say, okay, yeah, we may have not even a playoff team, perhaps a higher seed playoff team, probably a 4 or 5 or something like that. A week later, we have Cal at Arizona, so it doesn't get any easier for Arizona. They host Central Washington, then they host Cal. Getting through that, and that's one of the things everyone talks about with D1A rugby. Can a D1AA team beat a D1A team on a certain weekend? Sure. Can they do it week after week after week, right? Playing those games. It's really, really tough. Arizona's resilience will be tested on that. I'd love to see how that goes. Meanwhile, also on the same weekend, Lindenwood plays Arkansas State, longtime rival. They're not in the same conference anymore. Arkansas State looking very strong. They're in an independent conference, so that's going to be a big game, a major statement game for Arkansas State, and they've got a shot to win that one. And then finally, down in the Red River, Texas A&M versus Texas. Now, I don't know how it's all going to shake out really in terms of whether Red River champion is going to be seeded high enough, ranked high enough to get into the playoffs, things like that. But I do know that this game is probably going to decide it. And Texas did beat A&M in a non-conference game in the fall. We can maybe take that with a grain of salt. I don't know. But Texas is really an up-and-coming team. Aggies have been strong for years. New coaches for both of these teams. So let's have a look at what they can offer and see if perhaps they can work their way up the rankings. Still some stuff to come later, of course. A big game that we want to look ahead to would be Arizona UCLA and then UCLA Cal Poly. And UCLA Cal Poly is sort of a grudge match because Cal Poly got into the playoffs, UCLA didn't. UCLA felt that they should have last year, so we'll see about that one. Those chases for those other seeds, as opposed to the teams that we always see in the playoffs, we'll see what happens with West Point, what happens with Mount St. Mary's, what happens with even Penn State, and certainly with Mary Washington. We'll keep an eye on all of that. But those are some of the games that I'm really keeping a close eye on in February, and with an eye toward major rankings, major playoffs, major championships.